And I think there are forms of suffering for which there is no accountability, or that we cannot explain. And indeed, maybe that's part of what happens in Kafka. There's suffering, there's a trace of guilt, but there is actually no bona fide guilty subject. There's the kind of scattering of it. And I think it reopens the question of whether there's a certain kind of suffering that a juridical framework cannot imagine or cannot address. In the same way, maybe there's a certain kind of happiness that juridical redress cannot give us. Cannot give us. Like winning our court case is not finally satisfying. The satisfaction we might get from winning the court case is not what we want to call happiness. But if we're living in a world in which that juridical definition of satisfaction poses as happiness, we've lost something. So there's the question of what is outside the juridical frame in both cases. Yeah.
I would like to come back with the problem of punishment and the death penalty. I think the question was great, was not a journalist question, and to be honest, I didn't like your answer so much. I think that the question was pointing out a core political element.
The question was
excellent and was pointing out
a core political
element. Professor Agamben wrote in Homo Sacer, Imperium vitae nesisque potestas. That is to say, political power, the key element of political power is the decision about life. If we talk about politics, we talk about a decision about the life. So, I think that any political commitment has to face the problem of the life. My question in this moment should be, do you have any political commitment?
To be exact, this definition, which is a Roman law definition, refers not to politics but to law. Vitae nescisque potestas is a juridical Roman form, no? Referring to the juridical power of the sovereign to decide. I was not at all saying that politics has to, biopolitics has to do with this in Foucault perspective. No? When life becomes the wager, what is at stake in the political system, then we have what Foucault called biopolitics. So I don't agree with your definition. Law, my point is that in law the question is the inclusion of life in the
political power. You wrote the first fundamental of political power is a life that you can kill. Political power is the decision about life.
Isn't it imperium? Yeah. But okay, if I can add something here.
I think the problem with Eichmann is not a juridical problem; it's a political problem, because the law is the rationalized wish of the winner, and that is politics. And sovereignty, the power that is outside and inside the law, is in the it's a political decision. Law is a political decision, rationalized political decision, but it's impossible, in my opinion, to separate these two dimensions, law and politics. And this is the problem of legitimacy and legal.
The model of politics depending of conceived as a decision life, it was precisely the model I was criticizing.
Yes.
I was making this. I was. With respect to Foucault, I said the problem of biopolitics is much more old. We found already in the beginning, for instance, in Rome. But then this was the model I meant to criticize. I'm not saying politics is always a decision about life. This would be the decision of a Nazi politics.
No, and let me put it to you in a different way. If I remember this argument correctly from both Foucault and from Agamben, the point was to think about those situations in which a sovereign decided who shall live and who shall die, and this was understood to be belonging to a previous organization of political power. But then when we move into modernity, and it looks as if at first we have surpassed that or overcome that, but actually we've moved into a different regime where the question is who will be left to die, or how do we understand those who are left to die, right? So there's not the sovereign making the explicit decision, you shall hang in public, or except apparently Arendt, who's still re-embodying the sovereign, who will say you must hang. It's kind of a great moment to read in light of Foucault. No, perfect. But through what forms of systematic negligence, or through what distributions of geopolitical power do we find suddenly populations who are starving or who are left to die? And okay, so that's an analysis of how political power works, but it's not saying that if you want to be political, you must make the decision who lives and who dies.
What I'm saying, if you are going to challenge the political power, you have to assume, you have to face the problem of life, because if not, you are not doing politics.
I know, but you keep re-invoking a certain kind of sovereign decision maker who now will decide who lives and who dies, or who will be brave enough to say, yes, I'm in favor of the death penalty, or no, I'm against it for the following 18 reasons. And I think that you're rehabilitating the sovereign, and I actually think it's the dispersion of the sovereign which might be the most important political aim, which doesn't mean we don't debate such issues and come to positions on them, but if our status as political actors depends on our imitation of sovereign deciders, that would be a Schmittian nightmare.
Maybe we should read Schmidt in another way. I don't know, probably this is a very difficult point, but if we think about Antigone, when Antigone challenged Creon, she decides about a life, her life, and she used her life, she took a decision about her life in order to challenge the political power. Even the bomber, the kamikaze, takes a decision about the key element in politics, the life, his life or her life. We can, in my opinion, establish another concept of politics. Politics is what we have, and law is what we have. And the sovereign, if the sovereign is the enemy, you can speak a different language. It's the sovereign who is establishing the rules of the game. And we can go away, go outside and trying to play the game with other rules. And I think that the history of the liberation movements in the 20th century, in the 19th century, the history of the anti-colonization movement is the history of the political violence. I think it's so. The question about Eichmann is a political question. The decision about the life of a Nazi is not a problem of law or a moral problem, I think. But
I just want to know, do you think Antigone is a sovereign actor?
Didier said Antigone in this world would be considered a terrorist. Why?
Yes, I know, but it's almost as if you're saying that either we're truly political, either when we're willing to decide on life or death, or when we put our own life and death on the line. I mean, that seems pretty extreme. And I actually think we're sidestepping the question of what the specific organization of life is, right, at any given time and place. And what's the political organization of life, which is part of the question of biopolitics. And I feel like you're actually appealing to a vitalism that wants to sidestep the question that about how life is organized and whether we agree with the way in which it's organized. That takes us into a very different domain of politics. Then we're thinking about the distribution of resources. We're thinking about whose lives are considered livable or recognizable, or whose lives are protected by international law and whose lives are not. I mean, I think that you're moving into sovereignty and vitalism at a quick pace.
Yeah, both Antigone and the said bombers are obliged by sovereign power to act in this way. They are not at all. Antigone was obliged to do this. She's not killing herself. That's false.
There are different interpretations. It's true.
And the suicide bombers. So it's not true that you have to accept their point of view. This can be in a struggle. but it's not true. I mean, this must not be the political model you have on your mind. If you have this political model in your mind, there is no possible issue.
Also, I think
you can
even
just. No, it seems.
No, I just, I think we're actually dealing with very different conceptions of what life is, especially, if you think about martyrdom and in so-called suicide bombing, which life? The life here, the eternal life, the life of paradise? What are we talking about? I just think we've got lots of different configurations going on.